Picture this: a restaurant chain worth more than $50 billion. A stock that made early investors millionaires. A brand so beloved that people waited in lines out the door just for a foil-wrapped burrito the size of a newborn baby. That's Chipotle at its peak. But just a few years after hitting that $50 billion valuation, this same company was drowning in social media outrage, viral TikToks accusing it of skimping on food, a CEO publicly admitting something was wrong, and shareholders lining up to sue. How does a company go from Wall Street's golden child to a punchline about shrinking portions in less time than it takes most restaurants to open a second location? Stick around, because by the end of this video, I'm going to show you the one photo, a single, almost forgettable image that perfectly captures how Chipotle's entire empire started and how it's now fighting to hold on to what made it great in the first place. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the entire story of Chipotle. Not just the highlight reel, the real story. Why it rose so fast that Wall Street didn't know what hit them. Why it nearly collapsed under the weight of a food safety crisis that made national news. And why, even after clawing its way back to the top, it's now facing a new kind of crisis. One that isn't about bacteria in the lettuce, but about trust in the scoop. By the end of this video, you'll understand the exact formula that took a fine dining dropout and turned him into a billionaire, the mistakes that almost destroyed everything he built, and the uncomfortable question hanging over Chipotle right now: can a company built on integrity survive getting caught cutting corners? And if you stick around to the end, I'll show you that one image I mentioned, the thing that symbolizes this entire rise and fall in a single frame. Let's get into it. To understand Chipotle, you have to understand that it was never supposed to exist in the first place. Not like this, anyway. In 1993, a young chef named Steve Ells graduated from the Culinary Institute of America with one dream: to open a fine dining restaurant. Not a burrito shop. Not a fast casual chain. A real, white tablecloth, chef's tasting menu kind of restaurant. But dreams like that cost money. A lot more money than a culinary school graduate actually had. So Ells came up with a plan. He'd open a small, fast, simple restaurant first, just to make enough cash to fund the real restaurant he actually wanted to build. That side project was Chipotle. The first location opened in Denver, Colorado, and it cost about $85,000 to get off the ground, pocket change by restaurant industry standards. Nobody, including Ells himself, expected it to become anything more than a stepping stone. Here's the twist: it worked almost immediately. The restaurant became profitable within a single month. That's almost unheard of in the restaurant business, where most new spots bleed cash for years, if they survive at all. Why did it take off so fast? Because Ells did the opposite of what fast food was doing at the time. While every other quick-service chain in America was chasing frozen, pre-packaged, reheat and serve efficiency, Chipotle went the other direction entirely. Fresh ingredients. Meat that wasn't pumped full of additives. Food assembled right in front of the customer, so you could see exactly what was going into your meal and exactly how much of it you were getting. And the menu? Deliberately small. While competitors were adding new items every quarter to chase trends, Chipotle stripped things down to the essentials: burritos, bowls, tacos, salads, built from the same core ingredients. Fewer menu items meant faster lines, more consistent quality, and a kitchen that could run like a machine instead of a chaotic short-order diner. Then came the phrase that would define the brand for the next 2 decades: food with integrity. It wasn't just a marketing slogan. It was a positioning statement aimed directly at an industry that had trained customers to expect cheap, processed, forgettable food. Chipotle was betting that people were hungry for something else. Something that felt more honest. And the timing could not have been better. American consumers were just beginning to care about where their food came from, long before farm to table became a trendy phrase you'd see on every menu in the country. Chipotle wasn't following a trend. It was ahead of one. This is the part of the story people forget. Chipotle wasn't a burrito chain that got lucky. It was a precise, deliberate rejection of everything the fast food industry stood for at the time, and customers rewarded it instantly. But a small chain in Denver doesn't become a $50 billion company on good burritos alone. It needed fuel. And in 1998, that fuel showed up in a very unexpected form. In 1998, McDonald's, yes, that McDonald's, made an investment in Chipotle. Think about how strange that sounds for a second. The largest, most process-driven fast food company on the planet, the company that basically invented reheat and serve efficiency at scale, decided to bankroll a small chain built entirely around rejecting everything McDonald's stood for. But McDonald's didn't just dip a toe in. Over time, it became Chipotle's majority investor, pouring capital into the brand and using its own playbook, real estate expertise, supply chain muscle, expansion capital, to help Chipotle open new locations across the country at a pace it never could have managed alone. This was Chipotle's unfair advantage. It got the benefits of megacorporation-level resources and infrastructure, without having to compromise on the fresh, ethical, high-quality identity that made it special in the first place. It was the best of both worlds, fast food money funding a slow food philosophy. By the early 2000s, Chipotle wasn't just growing, it was exploding. New restaurants kept opening, kept turning profitable fast, and kept building the same cult-like following that started in Denver. Then, in 2006, Chipotle did something that changed everything. It went public. And this wasn't just a decent IPO. It was one of the best-performing restaurant IPOs in history. Shares nearly doubled on the very first day of trading, a signal to Wall Street that this wasn't just a trendy burrito chain, it was a genuine growth machine. Not long after, McDonald's made an equally significant move. It sold off its entire ownership stake, and Chipotle became fully independent. The parent company that had funded Chipotle's rise stepped aside completely, leaving Chipotle to run its own show, and Chipotle didn't slow down for a second. From here, the chain expanded aggressively across the United States. Restaurants were designed with open kitchens, letting customers watch their food get made in real time. Transparency as a growth strategy. Every meal was customizable, item by item, which meant customers felt in control of exactly what they were eating and how much of it. Burrito bowls became a phenomenon of their own, essentially a deconstructed burrito that fit into the growing low-carb, high-protein diet culture of the 2010s. And guacamole, despite an upcharge that could have scared off price-sensitive customers, became one of Chipotle's most iconic, most photographed, most talked-about products. Chipotle avoided artificial flavors. It refused to install freezers in many of its restaurants, an operational choice that forced every location to rely on fresh food prepared same day, reinforcing the brand's entire identity at the ground level, not just in the marketing copy. Then came the next unfair advantage: technology. Digital ordering became a massive growth driver, and the mobile app made ordering ahead more convenient than ever. Delivery partnerships opened up an entirely new sales channel. And when COVID-19 hit and dining rooms shut down across the country, digital sales surged, keeping revenue flowing when competitors without strong digital infrastructure struggled to survive. On top of that, Chipotle rolled out Chipotlanes, dedicated drive-through lanes exclusively for picking up mobile and delivery orders. New store openings increasingly included a Chipotlane by default, because it dramatically boosted throughput and efficiency without needing extra staff inside the restaurant. Investors loved every bit of it. Chipotle wasn't just a restaurant chain anymore. It had become one of the most valuable restaurant companies in America. This is the part of the story where everything looks unstoppable. By the mid-2010s heading into the following decade, Chipotle had become a genuine Wall Street favorite. Same-store sales, the number analysts obsess over because it strips out the effect of just opening more locations, stayed consistently strong. Customer traffic kept climbing year after year. The company's digital loyalty program pulled in millions of members, giving Chipotle a direct line to its most engaged customers and mountains of data about what they wanted. The brand leaned hard into sustainability and ethics, promoting responsible farming practices and animal welfare initiatives, while continuing to reduce artificial preservatives across its menu. It marketed fresh aggressively, and its minimalist branding, that clean, no-nonsense visual identity, became instantly recognizable, amplified by a growing wave of social media buzz that Chipotle didn't even have to pay for. The stock generated enormous long-term returns for shareholders. At its peak, Chipotle's market value eventually exceeded $50 billion, a staggering number for a company that started with $85,000 and a chef who just wanted to fund his real dream restaurant. Investors began treating Chipotle as a premium restaurant stock, not just another fast food name, but something closer to a luxury growth brand that happened to sell burritos. In 2018, the company brought in a new CEO, Brian Niccol, who had previously led Taco Bell through its own reinvention. Under Niccol, digital innovation accelerated even further. New menu items were introduced, carefully, cautiously, never diluting the core lineup, and restaurant expansion kicked into an even higher gear. From the outside, at this exact moment, Chipotle looked absolutely bulletproof. A brand with a cult following, a soaring stock price, a beloved digital ecosystem, and a CEO with a track record of turning brands around. But here's the thing about false peaks. They're called that for a reason. Rewind for a second, because there's a flaw buried earlier in this story that we need to go back and look at, one that didn't seem fatal at the time, but was quietly sitting there the entire time Chipotle was celebrating record growth. Chipotle's entire brand identity was built on a promise: fresh, minimally processed food, made in an open kitchen, without the safety net of industrial freezing and heavy preservatives that most fast food chains rely on to keep bacteria and spoilage under control. That promise was the whole point. It's what made Chipotle special. It's also, quietly, a serious operational risk. When you refuse to use freezers across hundreds and eventually thousands of locations, when your competitive advantage depends on fresh ingredients moving quickly through a decentralized supply chain, prepared by hand, in an open kitchen where every mistake is visible, you are one bad shipment, one undertrained employee, one skipped procedure away from a serious problem. This wasn't a flaw anyone was talking about during the boom years. It didn't show up in earnings calls. It didn't scare off investors. It was baked into the exact same operational model that Wall Street was praising as visionary. This worked for years. It fueled explosive growth. But it planted the seeds of something dangerous, a structural vulnerability that was invisible right up until the moment it wasn't. That vulnerability came due in 2015. Chipotle faced a wave of food safety outbreaks that rippled across multiple states almost simultaneously. E. coli cases were traced back to the chain in several states. Then came reports of norovirus outbreaks. Then salmonella incidents on top of that. This wasn't one isolated incident at one unlucky location. It was a rolling, compounding crisis, and that's exactly what made it so damaging. Hundreds of customers became ill. And in an age of instant news and social media, this wasn't a regional story. It was a national one. Sales dropped sharply almost overnight. Customer trust, the exact thing Chipotle had spent 2 decades building its entire brand around, collapsed in a matter of weeks. The stock price, which had been climbing for years, fell significantly as investors scrambled to understand how deep the damage went. Restaurant traffic dropped across the board, even at locations that had nothing to do with any of the outbreaks, because customers couldn't tell which restaurants were safe and which weren't. When your entire brand promise is fresh and clean, a food safety scandal doesn't just hurt, it attacks the core of who you are. Chipotle had to temporarily close stores for full food safety reviews. It rushed to overhaul its procedures, expanding employee training and changing how food was actually prepared in the back of house. But the damage was done, and it wasn't the kind of thing that gets fixed with a single press release. This became one of the biggest restaurant PR disasters in modern history, not just because of the scale of the outbreaks, but because it happened to a company that had marketed itself as the ethical, trustworthy alternative to everything wrong with fast food. The fall felt bigger because the rise had been built on the exact opposite promise. Recovery wasn't going to happen overnight. It took years to rebuild what had been lost in a matter of weeks. Here's where the story could have gone one of two ways. Some brands never recover from a crisis like this. Reputations built over 20 years can be permanently damaged by a single bad season of headlines. The trigger that determined which path Chipotle would take wasn't a single external shock this time. It was a leadership decision. In 2018, Chipotle brought in Brian Niccol as CEO, someone who had already proven he could rebuild a struggling brand at Taco Bell. This is the point of no return in the story, but not in the direction you'd expect from a rise and fall narrative. Instead of the trigger event accelerating collapse, it became the turning point that determined Chipotle wouldn't just survive the food safety crisis, it would come back stronger than before. Niccol's arrival meant the company was about to bet everything on rebuilding trust from the ground up, using digital innovation, marketing, and operational discipline as the tools to do it. So instead of a straightforward collapse, what followed was a genuine turnaround. Niccol focused heavily on rebuilding customer trust. Marketing became more aggressive, working to remind customers of everything that had originally made Chipotle special. The company's rewards program helped increase customer retention, giving people a reason to come back and start trusting the brand again, one visit at a time. Digital ordering became a major revenue engine, growing far beyond what it had been before the crisis. Delivery partnerships expanded further, and Chipotlanes kept improving convenience at a growing share of new locations. Limited-time menu items generated fresh excitement and gave customers new reasons to visit. New restaurant openings accelerated once again. Revenue reached record levels. Profits improved. Investors, who had fled during the crisis years, slowly regained confidence, and then more than regained it. The stock climbed dramatically after 2018, eventually making Chipotle one of the best-performing restaurant stocks of the following several years. Expansion plans continued at pace, and optimism returned to Wall Street in a big way. It looked, once again, like Chipotle had figured out the formula, this time seemingly immune to the mistakes of its past. But brands that get this big, this fast, tend to run into a different kind of problem. Not a bacteria problem this time. A trust problem of an entirely different flavor. Beginning around 2023 and into 2024, something started brewing on social media that Chipotle couldn't outmarket its way past. Complaints about smaller portions started spreading across TikTok. Customers were filming themselves opening their bowls and burritos, comparing them side by side with what they remembered getting years earlier, and accusing Chipotle of quietly skimping on food while prices kept climbing. Then an influential voice amplified it even further. Food critic and influencer Keith Lee, whose reviews carry enormous weight with a massive online audience, publicly criticized the inconsistency in portion sizes he was seeing across different locations. Once his content entered the conversation, the controversy went from a scattered complaint to a full-blown viral moment. Chipotle's initial response was that official portion standards hadn't changed.